Welcome to class. This is Introduction to Political Ideas, and I'm Ken Hicks, and we've been talking about liberation, ideologies, and the politics of identity. It's obviously, again, touchy subject. We're dealing with a lot of identity groups and the challenges that they pose to sort of mainstream political understandings. There's been a lot of kind of surrounding litigation, challenging whether these folks have a right to say certain things. We're nevertheless going to talk about them. Today we're going to be dealing with continuing our discussion of women's liberation. And then we're going to take up the subject of gay liberation and the politics of the LGBTQ plus community. Let me emphasize, nothing in this presentation is intended to create stereotypes, stigmatize certain races, place blame on one race for racism against another, assign moral burdens to one race, and or divide individuals or groups by race. So let's dive in. We've been talking about women's liberation. There continue to be challenges to women's, again, achieving kind of equal dignity and equal opportunities under our current system and how we do things socially and politically. From a feminist perspective, the argument is that there is a masculine system of power that is systemic and pervasive, that structures political and social arrangements. It's not confined to legal or political institutions, but it infiltrates into culture and even language. The use of female bodies to sell everything from cars to soap. There's a famous example of Paris Hilton, who was washing a car in a scanty bathing suit, and then all of a sudden she picks up a hamburger and starts biting into it. And that was literally a fast food ad where they were basically paying, undoubtedly Paris Hilton was paid a lot of money to do that. But it reflects also in other kinds of social mores. For example, older men divorcing their wives to marry much younger trophy wives. There's a picture there of Jeff Bezos and his new wife. He literally kind of rented out the city of Venice, I want to say, for a period of time, which is seeming pretty exorbitant to bring in a bunch of billionaires and pay a tourist attraction to basically shut down. Many feminists argue that there is a need for a broader cultural struggle to actually break down some of these masculine power structures. An example of a more critical version of feminism is Marilyn Frye. She is I believe a professor emeritus now at Michigan State. She is actually from Tulsa, Oklahoma, so an interesting point there. Her book, The Politics of Reality, Essays in Feminist Theory, which was published in 1983, is considered one of the kind of canon pieces of feminist theory of the 1980s. So she's making a fundamental claim. Women are oppressed, and she acknowledges that the word oppression repels and attracts. It's dangerous and dangerously fashionable and endangered because, again, we all feel constraints in our lives. And so the counterclaim would be that we are all somehow oppressed. And so the problem for Frye is that if everyone is oppressed, then no one can be oppressed. And she writes, "Thus we are silenced before we begin. The name of our situation has been drained of meaning and our guilt mechanisms tripped." And so again, the point being that her argument is we need to be clear about what we're talking about. When we say that women are oppressed, there is a meaning to that statement. And so she's basically making the argument that claiming that we're all oppressed is sort of a nonsensical claim. A person can be miserable without being oppressed. We need to think clearly about what oppression requires and involves. And unfortunately, there are a number of obstacles to clear thinking when it relates to the oppression of women. But for Frye, her argument is we need this word, this concept, and we need it to be sharp and sure. So what is the meaning of the word oppress? And again, she's basically making the notion that oppression is a compound term. The primary phrase behind it, though, is to press, to flatten or to squeeze a thing. The press of the crowd, pressed into military service, to press a pair of pants, a printing press, the pressing the button, to depress or press a button to ignite something. An olive press crushes olives between stones to extract its oil. An important aspect of the element press is that there's typically a point to it. For Frye, the same is true of oppression. Key elements of a press include a process to mold, immobilize, and to reduce that thing. And one of the key aspects that Frye this is one of the things that she's sort of famous for, is the idea of a double bind. And that is, in her view, kind of the mundane experience of oppression, the banality, if you will, of oppression. Situations exist in which options are reduced to a very few, and all of them expose the oppressed person to a penalty, to some sort of censure, or to some form of deprivation. The requirement, for example, for women to smile, to avoid smiling, risks being considered difficult. Of course, if you do smile, you're also being considered potentially compliant. One can only choose to risk one's preferred form and rate of annihilation, according to Frye. And she points to the idea of a sex trap, the idea, the decision that women confront, whether they will engage in sex or whether they will forego sex. Younger women in particular are often placed in a double bind regardless of their choice. If a woman chooses to be sexually active, she confronts punishment for being easy, for being considered, for example, a slut. If a woman chooses to avoid sex, she's considered accused or insinuated that she is a man-hater, that she is frigid, that she is incapable of sexual enjoyment. Again, for Frye, both heterosexual activity and heterosexual non-activity are likely to be taken as proof that you wanted to be raped, and hence, of course, you weren't really raped at all. And that for her is the reflection of the sense in which women oftentimes cannot win for losing. The minute that they attract the attention of a male, they are placed in this double bind. She uses a metaphor of the bird cage, and what she's basically pointing to is the idea that we are oftentimes missing the forest for the trees when we're looking at oppression. So if you adjust the focus of a bird cage to just one strand of the cage's bars, your myopic view prevents you from seeing how that one strand connects to other strands and connects in a systemic way that confines the bird to the cage. There is no physical property of any one wire that shows how the bird's movement is inhibited. It is only when you step back, according to Frye, stop looking at the wires one by one microscopically and take a macroscopic view of the whole cage, that you see why the bird does not go anywhere. And then you will see it in a moment. So why is oppression so hard to see? In many ways, Frye is basically arguing that the many ways in which women are oppressed are oftentimes unobtrusive and even innocuous. So she asks, how is a man opening a door evidence of oppression? Frye's claim is that the male door opener is actually playing up on false helplessness. Door opening and similar acts of help are reinforcements of female helplessness. Related social mores prevent women from walking alone at night, inhibiting their freedom of movement because of the fear that they would encounter some male who would who would take up the opportunity to rape them. I confess, as a male, I was raised on an Army base. Both my parents were Army officers. I opened doors. I opened doors for men. I open doors for women. I am a promiscuous door opener. I understand her point, but I also think that particular aspect of pointing to that and saying that it is oppression seems to me at times to be a bit overdrawn. She points us to the inhabitant of the cage. Oppression is meant to trap the groups of which individuals are merely a part. Physical confinement and segregation of the group is not common to all oppressive structures. The very dispersal of women across race, religion, and socioeconomic groups mean that women experience oppression differently. If you've ever seen the movie The Help, you get a sense in which white women in the South faced a very different reality from black women in the South, who were the ones that were engaged in the bus boycott that prevented many black homekeepers from getting to work on time. But at the same time, there was this recognition among the white wives of Southern white husbands that they felt a common cause. And in many instances, those white women helped black women make it from place to place. They oftentimes acted as sort of taxi services, much to the chagrin of their white husbands. She also argues that all women are, to some extent, oppressed by their opportunities. They are oppressed by the kinds of work they are permitted to do. Regardless of class, according to Frye, women's service falls into discrete categories. Personal service, the work of maids, cooks, secretaries, and whatnot. We are often, as women, women are often cooking for their children. They are cooking for their husbands. They are cooking for their parents. Sexual service, providing sexual gratification, bearing children, being a loyal spouse, is an example of this kind of service. And finally, there is ego service, stoking male egos, encouraging, supporting, praising, etc. She's basically arguing that, and this was, I think, more true in 1983 than it is today, that women's opportunities fell into those three categories pretty reliably, and not many women were able to escape those realities. And remember, in 1983, the profession, the prestige professions, lawyers, doctors, accountants, those kinds of jobs were disproportionately being done by men. She argues that there is, again, a context of oppression. No one is completely free of social structure, which imposes boundaries and limits on individual actions. I am a college professor. I need to show up to class and teach. I do not have the leisure to simply refuse to work. If I am to be paid, I have to work. There is a structure that confines my activities. I have to spend a certain amount of time preparing to teach. I am a husband. I have to come home at night. I have to be faithful to my wife. Those are constraints and boundaries on my personal choices. We are all, to that extent, confined. That does not mean that I am oppressed. So to determine whether a particular harm constitutes oppression, the contexts indicate whether the harm is part of a system of harm. So she uses the example of a rich playboy who is making, basically lives off money derived from stock options that his parents provided him, that breaks his leg skiing, and that goes through a period of pain while waiting for someone to come and help him and get him to the hospital. That is suffering, but it's not oppression, right? Nothing about his suffering suggests that there is a structure of forces and constraints imposing that suffering, pressing down upon him, confining his movements, other than the fact that he's got a broken leg. Think about, for example, the constraint of traffic laws. Undoubtedly, obeying traffic laws constitutes a kind of constraint. But requiring everyone to drive on the right side of the road or the left side of the road, if you're English, is beneficial for most people. It facilitates our ability to move. Now, being stuck in traffic heading down that one stretch of road in Owasso, for example, is a pain. It's annoying. You get stopped for a while. You may actually find yourself waiting 10 minutes, sometimes maybe even 20 minutes in the middle of rush hour. That is not oppression. That is simply inconvenience. Okay? So for Frye, things like traffic laws are part of a structure which shapes our behavior not to our reduction and immobilization, but rather to the protection of our ability of our continued ability to move and act as we will. To be autonomous means we have to be rule-following people. So, in order to understand how that kind of rule following is distinct from oppression, she asks you to think about what it's like to be, for example, in a ghetto, right? The boundaries of the ghetto keep white people from entering just as surely as it holds black and Hispanic and low-income people within the ghetto. Okay? If you don't know what a ghetto is, it's basically confined communities where people of a certain racial or ethnic or religious orientation are confined. They cannot live outside of the ghetto. They are not allowed to. For a variety of reasons, both formal and informal, they are confined to those areas. This predominantly emerged in the medieval period with regard to Jewish communities in Western and Eastern Europe. They were simply compelled to live in certain areas. Okay, and so the barrier disproportionately affects ghetto dwellers, the people living within those boundaries. Although as a white person you may want to go into the ghetto and enjoy exotic food and music or whatever else, you know at some point there is a reason why you should not go in. But you are not constrained in the same way that a person who is a liver, who exists within the ghetto. They have different meanings. It's like the walls of a prison. Yes, you as a free person, you are kept from entering the prison without good reason. But your experience of that wall is profoundly distinct from the person that has actually been imprisoned and placed within those walls and said, you are going to stay here for a certain amount of time. For Frye, the system of oppression of women is erected and maintained by men for the benefit of men. Now, this is a challenge, and we have a right to question Marilyn Frye's arguments. But we have to look at the argument itself. We have to say, is the evidence that she is providing, and she is a philosopher by training, she is using linguistic metaphors and examples to make an argument. And we can make the argument that as a system of oppression, that system has changed significantly since 1983. Nevertheless, this is the argument she's making. We should take it seriously. She argues that there are also internalized restrictions. Women's cramped posture, men's emotional restraint. They reflect a sense in which gender relations are confining how we behave emotionally around others. She asks the question, can men cry? Yes, in the company of women. And remember again, this is 1983. Sustaining a stoic demeanor for men benefits their status among other men. What about women's physical constraints? Women are expected to, kind of make themselves small, to use smaller mincing steps. Again, this is something that I suspect is no longer as prevalent as it was in 1983. But again, women's physical restraint is expected by men, but not rewarded. Instead, women are mocked and parodied and judged to be incompetent. Women are oppressed as women in ways that men are not because they're able to suppress their emotions. And so again, that is Frye's argument, that women are fundamentally oppressed in ways that men are not. So let's talk a little bit about, let's continue our discussion of feminism and the challenges that women confront. Increasingly, again, feminism has been conflated with its most radical factions. Feminism in male-dominated societies has always had a much more difficult path to walk. Feminism is a mainstream ideology in most Western democracies, but feminism is viewed as a threat in male-dominated societies, particularly in the Middle East and in Asia. You have the instance of Malala Yousafzai, who was nearly assassinated in Pakistan for advocating for female education. There's a picture of her on the slide. She survived an assassination attempt and continued to advocate for women's education issues in Pakistan, and for that reason was awarded a Nobel Peace Prize. So if Donald Trump wants to understand why, how to get a Nobel Peace Prize, maybe he should look to the example of Malala Yousafzai. The American Muslim scholar Amina Wadud has offered a reinterpretation of the Quran from a feminist perspective, and as a result has faced fatwas, which are religious edicts in the Islamic world, calling for her death. This is an example of the hard reality that women in certain parts of the world, their descent from masculine power structures comes at potentially a very high cost. The return of the Taliban to power in 2021 resulted in the systematic stripping of women's rights in Afghanistan. And almost immediately after they took control of the country, they began banning women's education outside the home. They have, again, reinforced strict requirements that women wear burqas when they are outside, that they always be accompanied by a male relative whenever they are going outside. And again, this is a problem that women in East Asia and the Middle East continue to confront. And it reflects a very hard reality, too, that in authoritarian countries, one of the first things they tend to do is systematically deny women basic rights and then move to deny them political rights. I'll talk about why that is in a moment. You also have in India the horrific problem of gang rape. And this is, again, a circumstance where you have, this is kind of occasioned by the surge of Hindu nationalism. And it is typically out-group women, women of lower castes or Muslim women or Western women who have been subjected to these horrible crimes where large numbers of men are capturing these women and subjecting them to gang rape and then often killing them. This is a reflection, we can often say that, and feminists often do say, that rape is an act of power, not of sex. But in this instance, it reflects this sense in which these are groups of men trying to force women out of the public realm, trying to force them, trying to make them afraid to be alone in public. And it is a horrible problem in India that is a blot on their society. You have also seen a backsliding from feminism in America. American feminists have warned that that the belief that past victories are permanent have been proven wrong. This really again began in the 1980s in the United States with the rise of talk radio shock jock hosts like Rush Limbaugh, who derided feminists as feminazis. Certain factions within the conservative coalition are deeply hostile to women's rights. That is especially true of religious conservatives, in particular fundamentalists and evangelical Christians are oftentimes persuaded that a woman's place is in the home and that they have no right to political right. You have the whole trad wife phenomenon where increasingly women are being told that they should go back to the traditional roles of housekeeper and wife and mother. In 2012, you had a variety of state laws that were designed to make abortion more difficult. And then, of course, in 2022, the conservative justices of the Supreme Court handed down the decision in Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization, striking down women's access to reproductive rights, with Samuel Alito making the argument that Roe versus Wade was egregiously wrong when it was handed down. And when you look at the slide, this is the New York Times slide, it's fairly recent, it shows you that overwhelmingly the states that have banned near or total bans on abortion are states that were either states of the former Confederacy, or states where, again, large numbers of Southerners, people with Southern kind of cultural mores, have moved or live. And so, again, there's a large number of states now where it is impossible for a woman, even if they have a problem with their, even if they have a desired pregnancy and the pregnancy goes sideways, where they literally can't get reproductive care. They have to wait out in their car until they very nearly bleed out, which creates a real health problem for a lot of women. Some women have increasingly argued that there is a war on women. A lot of religious Christians talk about these ideas that there's a war on Christmas. Well, a lot of women make the argument, and with some credibility, that there is a war on women. There is a literal manifestation of hostility to feminism. There is the sense of aggrieved entitlement of a group of men that kind of emerged online called the incel movement, which stands for involuntarily celibate. And within this online culture, these frustrated males have blamed women for their inability to have sexual relationships. The feelings of rage have spread rapidly online and have manifested in various points in outbreaks of random violence against women. Instances of violence attributed to incel men include the 2014 attacks in Santa Barbara, California, where Elliot Rodger wounded 14 and killed 6 before turning the gun on himself. He left a manifesto expressing his hatred of women for rejecting him, as well as his envy of sexually active men, of whom he killed several. In 2018, another self-described incel, Alec Minassian, claimed inspiration from Rodger's shootings and drove a van down a busy sidewalk in Toronto, killing 10 people, 8 of whom, again, were women. Hillary Clinton offers a statement on this. She basically says, why extremists always focus on women remains a mystery to me, but all seem to. It doesn't matter what country they're in or what religion they claim. They want to control women. They want to control how we dress. They want to control how we act. It's hard to believe that even here at home we have to stand up for women's rights and reject efforts to marginalize any one of us. And again, I can explain to Hillary Clinton the reason for this is that there are people who are authoritarian minded. And the easiest first step for authoritarians to achieve comprehensive control over society is to remove half of society from political consideration. When you drive women, and again, if Marilyn Frye is correct, there are already systems of oppression in place that can very easily be triggered to drive women back into the home. And so that is the argument, and it shouldn't be hard for Hillary Rodham Clinton to understand that. I think she actually was harmed in her 2016 presidential run by the more than decades of conservative assaults on her character. I would make the argument that if there was going to be a woman that would successfully run for president in this day and age, they're going to have to come out of the blue and not have enough time for people to build up these kinds of anti-feminist character attacks. Kamala Harris faced very similar kinds of slights and slanders and attacks on her character. And so, we shouldn't be surprised by these things. There is a third wave of feminism that is kind of going on, again, introducing issues of identity, multiculturalism, race, and sexual orientation into the challenges of confronting women. The politics of intersectionality, this is the argument, again, that there are dimensions of oppression for a woman belonging to multiple identity groups. And this reflects, again, the difference when I mentioned the movie The Help, the fact that black women were doubly oppressed by being both of a race that was subject to segregation and being women in a way that again, denied women basic opportunities. So for feminists, the concept of intersectionality posits that in addition to gender, issues like race and economic class create overlapping and interactive systems of discrimination that have a kind of multiplier effect. So for example, a low-income black woman who is also a member of the LGBTQ community confronts far more oppression than a white heterosexual woman from a middle-class background. And again, you can challenge that argument, but I think it's kind of hard to ignore the realities here. So for the radical feminist view of freedom, again, the agent is women. The obstacle, sexist beliefs and attitudes, combined with a male power system that reinforces that sexism. And the goal is, power, respect for differences. The idea that people have a right to be who they want to be, which in many ways reflects sort of the liberal argument for autonomy. That we should be more tolerant, we should be less judgmental of people whose decisions do not directly, harm us. Overall, there is unity among different factions. And again, if you take anything from this course, we should recognize that there are different gradations of every ideological perspective. Just as there are some socialists who are Marxists, but some socialists who are not Marxists, so too there are some feminists who basically are just focusing on the achievement of equality of opportunity, while there are others that are far more aggressive in terms of arguing that we need to take on the linguistic structures that reinforce female oppression. So most differences among feminists are tactical or matters of perspective. There is, of course, the inherent power and limitations that were manifested in the Me Too movement. The woman in the middle of this slide is one of the founders, which if you don't know what the hashtag Me Too movement, these are people, women, who came forward and pointed to instances where they were sexually abused or raped by powerful men. And that had, again, a significant effect. You had, of course, Weinstein, Harvey Weinstein, who was a very powerful Hollywood producer who was kind of brought down by the Me Too movement. Minnesota Democratic Senator Al Franken kind of ran afoul of the Me Too movement because while he was on an NCO tour, somebody snapped a picture of him posing, threatening, about to touch the breasts of a co-star of that NCO tour. That literally drove him from office. That was a picture. Which again, you can disagree. You can agree that what Franken was doing was playing comedically up in a way that objectified that woman. I think that was certainly justified a certain amount of condemnation. The question is, should it have cost him his office? And again, the reason he left was that several of his colleagues, including New York Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, said that he should resign. One person who, again, has faced a lot of challenges from the Me Too movement was, of course, Trump's Hollywood Access tape. Donald Trump in 2016, when he was running for election, had a tape where Donald Trump was basically saying, I have to put on lip gloss now because I just kiss women. I just kiss them. And he said other things. He talked about grabbing women by their private parts. And he said, when you're a star, they let you do it. That produced real pushback, and it antagonized a lot of people. Nevertheless, he won re-election. I would argue in part because the demonization of Hillary Clinton was far stronger than the stigmatization of what he literally said. It's amazing to me the extent to which in politics large numbers of Americans can forgive the person that they have decided is their guy or their person just about anything. I think a lot of conservatives were similarly appalled by their inability to successfully demonize Barack Obama. So this is not just happening in the United States. In Hungary, in Poland, in Italy, Brazil, the Philippines, and the United States, women are being forced to litigate for rights they believe that they had won. For example, in Poland, they recently, banned abortion. And that was, again, the conservative Law and Justice Party that instituted that. There have been some evolving tactics. Historically, women have tended to want to work within the framework of existing party systems. And the reason for that typically is that, women like blacks, like Hispanics, like many minority groups recognize that they have to engage in coalition building in order to achieve their political aims. They understand that even though, feminism, if all women were feminists, then it would be a much more comprehensive and powerful political movement. But the reality is, it is highly factionalized, and many women do not identify themselves as feminists. I can't remember the actual numbers, but a significant percentage of women basically reject the label of feminist. So it has happened in some countries that women have attempted to form feminist political parties. One example of that is in the United Kingdom. The Women's Equity Party emerged in 2015, largely as a result of just how moribund labor had become. They ended their 9-year experiment in 2024, and most of the women in the Women's Equity Party folded themselves back in to labor, which is part of the reason why labor has basically won control of government in the United Kingdom. So let's move on to address our second topic today, gay liberation, the widening focus and membership of the LGBTQ plus movement. First, we need to kind of talk briefly about the history of kind of same-sex attraction and sort of non-traditional views of sexuality. Certainly in the classical world, in the ancient world, Greco-Romans viewed the Greco-Roman civilizations, Greece and Rome, viewed same-sex relations as normal, okay? It was generally an accepted practice for different reasons. Heterosexual relations were acknowledged as necessary for reproduction, but same-sex relations were viewed as superior in many ways, again, because those societies believed that women were inferior to men. And so they believed that there was a level of love, I can't remember if it's agape or whatever it is, that suggests that same-sex relations are superior because they are relationships between equals. In Greece, those kinds of relationships often took the form of mentorships, where you would have an older man form a close bond with younger men that oftentimes, again, involved sex. The expectation was that those relationships would not be long-standing. It did occasionally happen, and there were times when couples that lasted long periods of time were viewed as somehow kind of acting outside the norm, but nevertheless, there was very little stigma attached to those kind of relationships. Among Romans, social status tended to take precedence in male relationships. If a man of higher status was engaged in a same-sex relationship with someone from a lower status, they were the initiator. And I don't want to go into any further detail, they were the male aspect of that relationship, and the person of lesser status was acting in the more receptive role. There again tended to be political and social implications. Quite often, these kinds of relationships were sort of the bonding that helped well-established males kind of achieve political significance. But again, given the Greco-Roman histories that they were written by men, there's very little documentation of lesbian relationships in the classical world, but it's likely that they did exist. And again, that's hard to, it's hard to find evidence for it, but it's hard to deny that sort of human nature would be what it would be. The attitudes towards sexuality really begin to change as these, what we might describe as the religions of the book, the books, the religions based on holy doctrines, began emerging from the Levant and the Middle East, which pretty unequivocally condemned same-sex relationships. The Levant refers to that period, that area of Eastern Mediterranean, that goes from southern Turkey to northern Egypt and includes Lebanon and what is today Lebanon and Israel. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all condemned homosexuality as sinful, perverted, and unnatural. It was one of the ways in the early Christian, or when sort of late phase during the Roman occupation of Israel, where the Maccabees, or actually even before then, when the Ptolemies controlled Israel, the Ptolemies, who were the Egyptian, kind of heirs to Alexander the Great's empire, began adopting Grecian ways, and one of the ways they did that was through same-sex practices, and the Maccabees oftentimes again used that as a fulcrum, arguing that within Judaism that this was sinful behavior, and that was again one of the political ways they were able to forge a sufficient coherent alliance among Jewish groups to overthrow the Maccabees. Traditional interpretations of these doctrines have been used for going all the way back to early Christianity to justify persecutions of homosexuality. Burning people at the stake was relatively common in same-sex, relatively common in European communities where people were found to have engaged in same-sex behavior. Again, there tended to be kind of a class phenomenon here. Wealthy people, powerful, the nobility who happened to engage in those kinds of eccentric behaviors were largely tolerated because they were powerful. Until the late 20th century, same-sex relations were very commonly viewed as criminal. That was certainly the case in the United States. It was also the case in England, where again, if you were caught engaging in homosexual behavior, you were subject to criminal punishment. A particularly poignant case is that of Alan Turing. He was a famous English mathematician and crypto-analyst whose work for the government, for the English government code and cipher school, was instrumental in breaking the German Navy's Enigma system. He was a pioneer in the field of theoretical computer science. He helped the Allies win the Battle of the Atlantic during World War II. There were, circumstances. In 1952, he was arrested for, basically there was a break-in of his apartment. He had been engaged in a relationship with a with a younger man. When police investigated the break-in, he acknowledged to them that he had engaged in sex with this person. They were both arrested under what was known as the gross indecency statute from an earlier law. He was given the choice between imprisonment and probation, but probation came with strings attached. He had to undergo effectively chemical castration, where you were injected with hormones and chemicals designed to feminize the person and reduce their libido. His private parts shrank. He developed breasts. He was, again, somewhat despondent about that. There were circumstances. He subsequently committed suicide, and there are political reasons for why they came down on him so hard. A year prior to Turing's arrest, the British intelligence community was rocked by what was famously known as the Cambridge Five scandal, where 5 highly placed members within British intelligence were revealed to be Soviet spies, and at least 2 of them that I know of, and probably all 5 of them, were gay. From that point forward, British intelligence viewed any member of their intelligence community that displayed homosexual tendencies as a likely security risk. So Turing's friends and relatives described him as taking his various legal problems in stride. He had also begun showing signs of despondency. He committed suicide on June 8, 1954, and left no suicide note. And it wasn't until 2016 when Parliament passed the Alan Turing Law, which retroactively exonerated and apologized to all those people who had been prosecuted for the crime of being gay. Decriminalization in the United States has also kind of wended its way. Again, all the state laws had what were known as sodomy laws on the books. Now, sodomy does not mean, it is not as narrowly confined as most Americans think it is. Most Americans think it reflects some particular sexual act. In fact, it is any non-procreative act, which by definition encompasses all homosexual acts. So we have this colonial legacy of these sodomy laws. Many of them have been on the books hundreds of years. The Supreme Court handed down a fateful decision in 2003, which became known as Lawrence versus Texas. John Lawrence and Tyrone Garner were arrested at Lawrence's apartment after one of Lawrence's former boyfriends called police and actually gave a false allegation that there was a man with a weapon threatening people in his apartment. Police found Lawrence and Garner engaged in sexual intercourse and arrested them for a misdemeanor under Texas's anti-sodomy law. Lawrence and Garner appealed their convictions, and the Texas Courts of Appeal, and it's kind of complicated. Texas state law has 2 levels of courts of appeals. The first Court of Appeal overturned the conviction and held that the anti-sodomy laws themselves were unconstitutional. Texas appealed that decision to an en banc hearing, which is a larger number of those judges on that circuit courts of appeal, where the decision was subsequently reversed. Lawrence and Garner subsequently appealed to the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, which upheld the convictions. On appeal to the Supreme Court, in 2003, the court ruled in a 6-3 decision that the anti-sodomy laws were unconstitutional violations of the 14th Amendment's Due Process Clause. Writing for the court's majority, Associate Justice Anthony Kennedy wrote that it was an integral part of human freedom for consenting adults to privately engage in sexual activity. And so, in effect, the significance of Lawrence versus Texas is that it extends the same presumption of privacy rights to members of the LGBTQ plus community as heterosexual people have. Nevertheless, there have been persistence of other forms of discrimination. For example, if you are a same-sex couple, in many instances, even if you are married, inheritance and insurance rights can be problematical in certain states. You have also had the resurgence of legal sanctions on LGBTQ plus issues in the form of anti-woke legislation. So, gay liberation emerged slowly in comparison to other kind of liberation ideologies for good reason. Obviously, to be a member of that community meant that you were committing a crime in most states. And in many states, those crimes were policed very aggressively. So the idea of living in the closet reflected this idea that if you were going to be your true self, you were presenting yourself for arrest. Okay, so gay liberation organized slowly, in part due to fears of legal persecution. The Mattachine Society was formed in 1950 to promote gay pride and solidarity. It was very quiet. There was nevertheless a legal campaign aimed at the American Medical Association to remove homosexuality from the American Psychiatric Society's list of mental disorders, which wasn't accomplished until 1973, I believe. Likewise, in 1955, you had the Daughters of Bilitis formed to promote and defend the interests of lesbians. And again, the problem for the LGBTQ community and for gay pride, broadly speaking, is that they are highly factionalized because their behavior is oriented around, they're clumped, if you will, around these certain kinds of behavior. Gay men behave differently than lesbians do. Members, queers and bisexuals and other members, transgenders, transgender individuals, transgender people behave. They have different priorities, and so it has been. So there has been a tendency for them to form in areas where their communities have tended to be able to coalesce, and so it's been sort of a factionalized kind of emergence. The flashpoint for gay liberation were the Stonewall riots, which began on June 28th, 1969, when police stormed a private club called the Stonewall Inn on June 28th, 1969. There were very few establishments that catered to an expressly gay clientele. Most of those that did were bars. In 1969, the Stonewall Inn was known to police to be operated by the Genovese crime family. And so to avoid challenges getting liquor licenses, which mafia-owned businesses tended to have, the Stonewall Inn was run as a private bottle club, which is to say it was kind of a BYOB club. You bring your own preferred liquor, and the people that worked there would provide Coke or whatever kind of soft drinks you wanted as well. So it's important to keep in mind, in 1969, many of the larger metropolitan police forces were really homophobic in this period. And the American legal system in general was not kind to members of the LGBTQ plus community. And so on the June 28th, that particular raid was especially disruptive, okay? Typically, raids that were run on these kinds of establishments that catered to gays, it happened often. But ordinarily, there would be consultation with the local precincts, and more importantly, they would generally do it during weekdays, okay? They didn't want to catch a really high traffic flow area. And what happened on June 28th illustrates why they didn't, because it was packed. There were over 200 people in the Stonewall Inn when the cops went in. There were not anywhere near enough cops to manage it. And the community of Greenwich Village was already really angry at police because the Republican Mayor John Lindsay had been pushing a crackdown on gay bars. So New York City police and the gay community were already in a state of high tension. And so the police broke in, they started yelling and shouting and trying to intimidate the customers. And the stereotype of members of the LGBTQ plus community are that they're all effeminate and they're all, kind of, I'm afraid. Well, this was not a bar of those kind of folks. This was a bar of people that were ticked off and lubricated with alcohol, and they fought back. And police very quickly lost control of the situation, and thousands, well, several hundred took to the street that night and for the next 2 nights. And they were just basically, if you've ever seen the movie Network, again, I'm dating myself, an old movie, but one of the Network people, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take this anymore. Well, that was the attitude of the gay community of Greenwich Village and Harlem at that particular point in time. And so there were 3 days of rioting, and it really reflected a flashpoint. And from that point forward, you begin seeing members of the gay community aggressively organizing and aggressively pushing back on attempts to criminalize their behavior. And so it's important to keep in mind many members of the LGBTQ plus community object to the label homosexual. They view it as a gay straitjacket. Many of them have a far more assertive and flamboyant, kind of approach to expressing their identities. Again, you have lots and lots of drag queens that parody the idea of straight sexuality. Many members of the gay and lesbian community are very butch, are very masculine, if you will, that defy these stereotypes of femininity. And in reaction to that, several states have passed what are known as anti-drag laws. Now, they are framed in such a way. For example, Florida has an anti-drag law that is designed expressly to say that you can't perform any kind of drag in front of children. And apparently there have been some instances where men in drag have done readings to children. I don't think any of the children have been damaged by this, but that's the nature of where these laws are going. They're trying oftentimes to say that these kinds of what they're trying to characterize as sexually deviant behavior are somehow harmful to children. The overriding concern of the LGBTQ plus community, the gay liberation movement overall, is the opposition to homophobia. Okay, that is sort of the strategic aspiration of the gay liberation movement. The original motivation was much more of a liberal, let's repeal overtly discriminatory laws that criminalize individual homosexual behavior. But additionally, the LGBTQ plus community increasingly seeking to overcome mistaken beliefs about their communities. So for members of the various gay liberationist movements, homophobia includes the belief that gay people all molest children, that gay people routinely seek out to groom children and young people to bolster their ranks, that gay people are all sexually promiscuous, that being gay or queer is an abnormal or perverted sexual preference that can be corrected by religious or psychological training, or that deep down most gay people really want to be straight, and that gay people can be straight if they try hard enough. These are sort of the assumptions that people that members of this community view as homophobic commonly evince. Okay. Nevertheless, there is growing tactical diversity within the gay liberation movement. Some gay people, again, adopt very conservative ideological positions, seeking acceptance and a seat at the table. The Log Cabin Republicans are an example of conservative members of the LGBTQ plus community, and they are accepted and identify as members of the community. Others adopt more liberal approaches. For example, some groups advocate the full inclusion of members of the LGBTQ plus community in the military, where being openly gay constituted grounds for a dishonorable discharge under the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy that was in place until recently. That policy was repealed in Obama's first term. Donald Trump has not really addressed Don't Ask, Don't Tell, but he has issued an executive order banning transgender people from the military. And so they're trying to kind of focus on a slice of the LGBTQ plus community that they feel like they can get away with discriminating against. Now let me address one thing. There are a lot of conservatives who believe that their religious teachings tell them that homosexuality is sinful. I have no problem with that. I think that, if that is your belief, you have a right to that belief. The challenge comes when religious communities begin instantiating their religious views within their state and local governments. Because that creates an intolerant environment. And I think that raises constitutional issues. I think that your right to be discriminatory is your right. You have a right to freedom of expression. You have a right to believe whatever your religion or your philosophy or whatever it is that you choose to form your belief systems around. Whatever it tells you, you should believe. The challenges are, how do we live together? That's the problem that we have, and I think that tolerance is the better way to go about living our lives. Same-sex marriage has been a focus of both large factions within the gay and lesbian communities. Conservatives' critics often complain that same-sex marriage constitutes a kind of special right to members of those communities. They tend to focus on the belief that, the kind of phrase that is often, it's Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. In 1996, a conservative Congress Republicans controlled both houses of Congress, passed the Defense of Marriage Act, which Bill Clinton signed and has stated ever since that he really regrets signing that. He says that he should have vetoed it and tried to make them override it. But he understood that there were still enough Southern Democrats that would have overturned him in 1996. So all this comes around, and I remember I was teaching a government class in that year, in 1996. I was teaching a class. It was a fairly small class at the University of South Carolina, and I asked the class then, is the Defense of Marriage Act a violation of the Constitution? Does it violate equal protection under the 14th Amendment? Does it violate due process? Does it violate the privilege, the full faith and credit clause? There are any number of ways that the Defense of Marriage Act could have been challenged. And again, it's important to keep in mind the context for the Defense of Marriage Act. It actually originated in Hawaii, where there was a law passed banning same-sex marriage, and the Hawaiian Supreme Court basically struck it down and said that same-sex marriage was unconstitutional. And there was a fear, especially among those states with conservative, with conservative control over their state legislatures and their federal caucuses and conferences, that people would get married in Hawaii and come back and insist on their states acknowledging the same-sex marriage. This is what we call the full faith and credit clause, which is in Article 4 of the Constitution, that basically says that contracts arising in one state need to be respected in other states. And marriage has always been one of those stickier issues. And so that's what gave rise to the Defense of Marriage Act. Subsequently, of course, for quite some time, from 1996 till 2015, same-sex marriage was accepted in some states, but basically rejected in most others. And so in 2015, the Supreme Court took that case up, and basically in the decision Obergefell versus Hodges, again, the Supreme Court overruled the state bans and the DOMA clause, or the DOMA Act, and basically said, with again Anthony Kennedy, which is interesting. Kennedy was a conservative justice, but on civil liberties issues, he was pretty much a civil libertarian. Kennedy held the Constitution promises liberty to all within its reach, a liberty that includes certain specific rights that allow persons within a lawful realm to define and express their identity. So the majority struck down the Defense of Marriage Act and state laws forbidding same-sex marriage as violations of both the 14th Amendment's due process and equal protections clause. And the decision provoked dissents from each of the four justices. Justice John Roberts complained that the court's majority had expanded the meaning of marriage from its original understanding to protect the process of child rearing. He also argued that it created a slippery slope, claiming that the court's rationale could be used to defend polygamy as a legitimate social arrangement. Associate Justice Samuel Alito's dissent criticized the majority for expanding the scope of the 14th Amendment's due process clause, arguing that it should only be invoked to protect the rights and liberties that are deeply embedded in the nation's history and tradition. That is an originalist interpretation that the court has been, the court's conservatives have been using to erode the rights of LGBTQ plus individuals and communities in recent court findings. And so, that's the reasoning that Alito used in overturning Roe versus Wade, and it's the reasoning Clarence Thomas used in his decision, New York Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin, which basically struck down all laws related to gun control, or severely weakened them, I should say. There have been rapid changes of attitudes towards members of the LGBTQ plus community. In 1996, only 26% of Americans supported same-sex marriage. In 2004, George W. Bush pushed for a constitutional ban on same-sex marriage, reflecting again conservatives' belief that they had a winning record, a winning issue there. But by 2011, 53% of Americans supported same-sex marriage. And it reflects this generational and geographical divide on same-sex marriage. Larger proportions of older Americans tend to oppose same-sex marriage, but support for same-sex marriage has significantly increased across demographic groupings. And a great deal of opposition to same-sex marriage is concentrated in the South, where again there are large fundamentalist and evangelical Christian populations. And so that kind of reflects kind of a churn at the state level where there's a lot of people fighting over these kinds of issues. So if you ask what changes, what causes this sudden change? First and foremost, it's the increasing number of LGBTQ plus community members coming out to families, friends, and neighbors. When it's your son, when it's your brother, when it's your father or mother that are coming out and saying, I am a lesbian, I am gay, that does something to you. That can impact your belief system. So putting a human face on these communities has gone a long way towards eroding, people's kind of unreflective, revulsion at this view. I remember early in my teaching career, I would ask people about their attitudes on these kind of things when we were talking about things like political socialization, and somebody would say, "Well, I don't want to think about those people having sex," and I said, "Well, then don't. It's a really easy resolution here." Are you saying that because you find it objectionable that no one should have, that people that you don't think should be having sex should be having sex? What kind of a presumption is that? That only attractive people or only people that you approve of should be having sex? that again reflects a basic problem with how our private belief systems get projected into our politics. There is also a generational factor. Gen Z and millennials are far more tolerant and positive towards sexual orientation than previous generations. There have also been a lot more positive portrayals of LGBTQ plus community members in popular media, in movies, and and other things. This Is Us is a great show that has a gay couple in it. That again is when you show them in non-stigmatizing ways. And remember, movies back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, all to the extent that homosexuality was portrayed, it was portrayed as somehow this person is sick, this person is demented, this person is somehow wrong. And so, in fact, there is a conservative case that has been made for same-sex marriage. In 2010, an unlikely partnership formed between two very powerhouse lawyers to overturn California's Proposition 8, which had banned same-sex marriage. Theodore Olson and David Boies. Olson was a conservative who served as an assistant attorney general in the Reagan administration, and as Solicitor General in the administration of President George W. Bush. Basically joined with David Boies, who's a notorious liberal, to overturn that ban. And the reason was that he was not a religious conservative. He was much more of a Burkean conservative that talks about the fabric of society, the belief that social arrangements that reinforce stability and provide meaning to the community members should be preserved. And so his argument is if you're actually doing something that is lending stability. One of the arguments that a lot of people used was that part of the reason why members of the LGBTQ plus community were often accused of promiscuity was that their sexual expressions had to be furtive. You couldn't do it in your home, or you had to go to gay bars and to bathrooms and places like bathhouses and places like that. Olson's argument is that if you give members of those communities the right to form partnerships, it will lend stability and meaning to their lives. That will be a good thing for those communities. And so that crack in the conservative coalition on same-sex marriage significantly weakened the argument against same-sex marriage and led to that rapid kind of change. So many of members of the LGBTQ plus community remain proud outsiders. Some want to be accepted by mainstream society. Others view mainstream society as irredeemably homophobic. They are radical by nature. Groups like Queer Nation, Lesbian Nation, and ACT UP are far more confrontational. But they share fundamental principles and goals that other members of their community share. And so again, when you look at the Gay Liberation View of Freedom, the agent are, again, members of the LGBTQ plus community. The obstacle is homophobia and mainstream beliefs that stigmatize members of the community. And the goal is, LGBTQ plus pride and dignity. So on that note, because I'm about to lose my voice, and I don't know why, but my nose is getting horribly stuffed up, I'm going to close. When we come back, we will continue our discussion of liberation ideologies, and I hope you will stay with me and maintain a tolerant attitude as we move through these different views of identity. I'll see you next time.